Okay, what is the system of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? Well, it can be described in a few different ways. I'm going to give you one rendition, which is pretty simple and will resonate with most of your listeners. Jiu-Jitsu is a system based around 4 distinct steps. You can add steps, you can subtract steps, but the rendition I'm going to give you now is probably the most widely known. It's beautiful, it's elegant, and it's deadly effective. Step number 1, take the fight to the ground. Take away the danger of explosive kinetic energy. Step number 2, get past his dangerous legs. Step number 3, work your way through a hierarchy of pins, each one graded upon your ability to harm your opponent with strikes on the ground and set up. Step number 4, submissions. And now the question that needs to be asked: where do leg locks fit into that system? Leg locks fit into the system in only one way: when the system has failed. When the system's not working and you can't take your opponent down, you can't pass his guard, you can't maintain a dominant position, and you can't get the regular submissions to work, fuck it, try a leg lock. Leg locks were seen for generations as a signal of failure. When you couldn't get the system to work, you had to resort to leg locks. It meant you were a bad jiu-jitsu player. You couldn't impose the fundamental system of jiu-jitsu, and so you chickened out and you went to leg locks. That's why they were despised. That was the real reason why for generations leg locks were dismissed. What I did is I tried to find an avenue where they could come in, and the results were surprising. The first thing is, our 4-step rendition of jiu-jitsu looked at jiu-jitsu from top position, where we took our opponent down to the ground and we were on top of them. But my study of jiu-jitsu didn't start from top position, it started from bottom position. If you look at my students in competition, you will notice that around 80% of their entries into leg locks come from bottom position or with their opponent behind them. In other words, from what are supposedly inferior positions. So most of my early work in leg locks was how to get into leg locks from disadvantageous positions, from underneath or when someone is behind me. But things became more interesting when I got further into the leg lock game and I started to realize that as you add leg locks into the game, you change the very nature of the sport. If you look at jiu-jitsu as it's ordinarily practiced, it's a single direction game. If someone is in front of me and I'm standing over them, jiu-jitsu is all about movement from the legs towards the head. I'm supposed to pass their guard, work my way up to chest contact, and get my head next to their head, either in front of them or behind them, either mounted or rear mounted. So jiu-jitsu always goes in one direction. If you ever get stopped or you lose position, you just start the process over again. It's a monodirectional sport. It always goes from the legs to the head. Once you start adding leg locks into the game, jiu-jitsu becomes a 2-directional sport where you can go from the head down to the legs. You can go in both directions. So if I'm passing someone's guard and I simply can't do it, I can fall back and go back into the legs. If I'm side control on someone and they start to recompose their guard, I can fall back into the legs. I'm going from their upper body down to their lower body. Traditional jiu-jitsu always goes from the lower body directionally up to the upper body, so that you end up head to head with your opponent. But once you start adding leg locks, jiu-jitsu for the first time becomes a 2-directional sport instead of a 1-directional sport. And you can play your opponent's reactions between the threat of lower body and upper body in ways that opens up submissions so much more easily than the traditional game.